At some point, without any announcement, your money started shrinking. Not disappearing. Not crashing. Just quietly doing less. The grocery bill got heavier. The same bag. Same brands. Same checkout lane. But the total felt wrong. You noticed it, but you moved on. Because life doesn't stop for inflation. That's the uncomfortable truth. Inflation doesn't arrive like a crisis. It settles in like humidity. Slow. Persistent. Hard to escape. And over time, it doesn't just change prices. It rewires how households make decisions. What they buy. What they delay. What they give up without even realizing it. This matters right now because inflation isn't just a headline anymore. It's inside daily routines. It's inside family arguments. It's inside choices that feel personal, but aren't. This is the story of how inflation quietly reshapes household behavior over time. And why most people only understand it after the damage is already done. Let's start small. Because inflation always does. Year 1. Prices rise a little. 3%. 4%. Maybe 5%. On paper, that doesn't sound dramatic. But households don't live on paper. They live on paychecks. And wages rarely move first. So in the beginning, families adjust in subtle ways. They don't panic. They optimize. Generic brands instead of name brands. Fewer restaurant visits. One less streaming service. Nothing feels permanent. Just temporary. Tightening. The irony is, this stage often feels responsible. Even smart. People tell themselves they're being disciplined. That they're cutting waste. But inflation isn't testing discipline. It's testing endurance. Because inflation compounds. That same 3% doesn't reset every year. It stacks. And while prices climb steadily, income tends to move in steps. Raises come late. Promotions are uncertain. Job changes are risky. So households enter phase 2. This is where decisions stop being cosmetic. Maintenance gets delayed. The car noise gets ignored. The dentist appointment gets pushed. These aren't bad decisions. They're rational responses. But they carry interest. Just not the kind you see on a statement. A skipped repair becomes a larger repair. A postponed checkup becomes a bigger bill. Deferred maintenance turns into emergency spending. Inflation loves delays. Because it makes tomorrow more expensive than today. At this point, households begin leaning on credit. Not recklessly. Strategically. A balance carried. Just for now. A payment plan. A card used to smooth the gap between prices and paychecks. This is where inflation starts to feel less like economics. And more like pressure. Because credit doesn't reduce cost. It redistributes pain. Monthly payments replace upfront prices. Stress gets amortized. And for a while, it works. Which is the dangerous part. Now comes the uncomfortable math. If inflation runs at 5% for 5 years, prices don't rise by 25%. They rise closer to 28%. But household budgets don't compound upward at the same rate. So families don't experience inflation as a single number. They experience it as a narrowing corridor. Fewer choices. Less margin. More fragility. And here's the part nobody likes to talk about. Inflation punishes stability. Fixed incomes fall behind first. Then salaried workers. Then small business owners. People who do everything right feel like they're losing ground anyway. This is when behavior changes psychologically. Households stop planning long term. They shorten their time horizon. Saving feels pointless when costs keep moving. Investing feels risky when cash flow is tight. Long-term goals become vague ideas instead of timelines. You don't cancel dreams. You just stop updating them. And quietly, priorities shift. Convenience replaces quality. Certainty replaces value. Liquidity replaces growth. This is also where irony creeps in. Inflation is supposed to encourage spending. That's the theory. But prolonged inflation often creates caution. People don't splurge. They brace. They hoard cash, not because it's growing, but because it's flexible. They delay purchases, waiting for relief that may never come. They hesitate. And hesitation has an economic cost of its own. Now zoom out. When millions of households make these micro-adjustments at the same time, the economy changes shape. Demand becomes erratic. Brands lose loyalty. Durability loses appeal to upfront affordability. Companies respond by shrinking products, lowering quality, or raising prices again. Which feeds the cycle. This is the hidden mechanism. Inflation doesn't just raise prices. It distorts signals. Consumers can't tell if something is expensive, or just expensive now. Businesses can't tell if demand is weak, or just cautious. So everyone hedges. And hedging slows everything down. Over time, inequality widens. Households with assets feel inflation differently. Rising prices inflate asset values. Debt becomes cheaper in real terms. Households without assets feel trapped. Cash loses value. Debt gets heavier. Same inflation rate. Two completely different realities. And here's the quietest consequence of all. Inflation erodes trust. Trust in prices. Trust in planning. Trust that effort translates cleanly into progress. When households stop trusting the future, they behave defensively. They choose safer jobs over better ones. They avoid risk even when it's rational. They stay put. This isn't irrational behavior. It's adaptive. But adaptation has a cost. Because economies don't grow from defense. They grow from confidence. By the time inflation cools, the damage isn't just financial. It's behavioral. Households have learned habits that don't unwind easily. Spending stays cautious. Risk stays suppressed. Growth lags. And that's the final irony. Inflation ends. But its effects don't. Years later, families still budget like the floor might drop out again. Still hesitate. Still carry the memory. So here's the unresolved question. If inflation quietly trains households to expect less, plan shorter, and protect more, what happens to an economy built on long-term bets, big risks, and delayed rewards? And more importantly, how many of your daily decisions feel personal, but are really just echoes of inflation you stopped noticing?